Okay, so here we are at the beginning of, what is it, the 1530 turn 9. And you'll have to excuse me a little bit. I'm going to just jump into what happened because I'm playing a game of Undead with my wife and have to be in and out so I don't get long times to handle everything. But I did the Monarch survival, and only the Venetian Monarch died. Remember, he was mad last turn. He got replaced by a very young son. It's actually at -1 for his stats. He's a 5/8/4 base, and he's got fragile health, which means he's more likely to die as well. You can see stats tend to decrease, so as a monarch remains of a certain dynasty, the dynasties kind of weaken and die out as they go, which is very similar to what happens to the Habsburgs, but it's specifically enforced with the Habsburgs. Even if they have dynastic crises and stuff, the Spanish rulers still become kind of weak until the end of, Charles II's reign. However the Spanish succession goes, if it doesn't happen, they just keep getting worse and worse through the game. All right. I'll be back in a bit. Okay, briefly through the events. Wave of obscurantism. This dropped everybody's stability, I think, by 1 point. Maybe 2, I'm not sure. Something dropped it. Yeah, I think this is by 2. I don't remember which one's which. Anyway, it affects the Protestants less. Whether or not it should affect the Turks, I've ruled that it doesn't. Didn't matter here because they were already at -3. But okay, that opened things up. Portugal gets a diplomatic penalty towards Morocco, one of their allies, or their only ally. Venice got an exceptional year. England got a +3 diplomacy to the Palatinate. Turns out that doesn't matter. They won it because it puts them in a position to cope with France. Unfortunately, Palatinate may still be Catholic. I have to look at the events. Anyway, first event from the historical, well, let me go for the minor one first. This was the last of the events from the political stage, which is Smolensk has now fallen to Russia. Russia is just growing at Poland's expense. Poor Poland is in the midst of this war with Turkey, and, you know, these would just happen. You don't have to justify them or whatever. They're automatic. If Russia was being played by a player, by whatever means, say in the later period, or with an event, with a game that had that many players, like EU8 or whatever, although that has its own rules, they would have to go to war with Poland. In this case, maybe they would get something. But usually, if they're the only person attacking Poland, it's a bad thing. These don't help them one bit. Okay, now to the big one. This is the Council of Trent and the Act of Uniformity. From the original, this is a little different. The original just had this as the Act of Supremacy in England. Allows England to become Protestant. I'm not sure there is something like that in this. So this only takes place if reform events have occurred at least twice. I'm not sure there's a free trip for the English to become Protestant in this game like there was in the original. And that's kind of disturbing. The first time I played it the original time, I kind of said, do I want England to go Protestant? I don't know. And since then I never have. Well, this time it looks like they may have to stay Catholic because I don't know if there's something for them. Okay, so what this does is, first of all Catholic and counter-reform powers lose a point of stability. You can see the markers have really dropped quite far. They all get revolts as well. Protestants lose 2 stability in a revolt. Catholic and Protestants will get casus belli against each other permanently. This ends up ending after the 30 Years' War, or the end of period 4. The Emperor gets a casus belli against the League of Schmalkalden, if it ever happens. That's in period 4. Protestants and Catholic Reform cannot ally with one another. Catholic counter-reform. But the Catholic Conciliatory, which is, I believe, both France and England chose, can ally with Protestants, I think. I'm not sure. All Catholic counter-reforms loses stability and suffer from revolt. No, you know, I think actually that's not these. That's only Spain. And that gets rid of some of these. I think it's got to be Catholic counter-reformation powers, which is really good news for somebody like Portugal, who, you know, they usually aren't involved in these religious disputes, and bang, they're hit with it. It looks like it's only counter-reformation, and the only counter-reformation power in the game are the Spaniards. They take a stability loss, but no revolts. Okay. The Emperor gets a permanent cast spell against the League of Schmalkalden. Yeah, we talked about that. Counter-reform power can place a new missionary it gains during a leader's phase directly into a revolt counter in a province in Ireland that's owned by Protestants. This missionary can lead the revolt as though it's a revolt leader. Okay, so this was not anywhere near as potent an event as I thought it was. I'm worried about England, though. They may not be able to go Protestant. Of course, Scotland may not be going Protestant either, unless another event comes up on that. And I think the Palatinate is the other non-Protestant until the third roll, whatever that means. All right. I'm not sure what this all means. Anyway, I'll try to figure it out looking over the events and see if there's a Henry VIII type setup in here. And then we go on to the income and all that. Well, this is definitely kind of an interesting situation because the Protestant Reformation, it took effect in Germany before anything else. It still happens. The first event in the Risto events gives you that. The second event, though, while I'm used to it letting the English kind of get a free pass and not have to make their choice then, they'll automatically get the effect later. It's not the case here. I've looked through the second period completely. I've looked through the Reformation event for the third Reformation. England made their choice. That's a choice that usually is going to fall earlier in the game than when England historically made it. But I'm not terribly bothered by the fact that they have to make their choice at the same time as everyone else. It doesn't really affect much, except that it's more likely to happen at an earlier period than it did historically. In which case, hey, we've got a Catholic England, and I've got to kind of pay attention to that because that's going to affect. They're not going to be as strong a colonial power as one expects them to be, because they just simply don't have as many actions as a Catholic power in that. Partially because of the Tordesillas idea, staying in touch with it, but otherwise. So, we're going to see a less historical game than I wanted to see, but on the other hand, we're seeing a lot of ahistorical stuff going on, with Turkey not really handling themselves well, Spain in a lot of trouble, and even Portugal kind of struggling more than they probably should. So, everybody's going to have their problems here, right? Well, the diplomatic phase was really mellow this turn. England made a roll on the Palatinate and just utterly failed. Most people have no money. Venice made a roll on the papacy, though, and got them up to entry in war. That means they spent $100 on this. They give 50 back, though. And this will help them keep, if anybody cares about it, Spain from being the sole defender of the Catholic faith. Now, an event could end up jumping in and causing this, but we'll see. Running into just how tight things are here money-wise. Spain had to take out a loan. I think it was a foreign loan, actually, so that they can get their gold back from Monterey. They have this fleet of gold. Now, they wouldn't have to do this if they have a merchant fleet here, but they have no way of getting the gold to this merchant fleet. They'd have to be close to it in order to do it. So, for example, if the gold was here or nearest to there, they could do that. But here they have to take it out this port. And doing that, well, Since they don't have a merchant fleet here, they have to do that. So they have to have at least $10. Well, they had 3 left and had to roll for a loan in order to get that. That'll give them a little bit extra money temporarily next turn, and also allow them to start jumping the inflation up, which is, it sounds like a bad thing for them because they get affected by the heavier inflation because they're exporting the gold, but they start affecting everyone else, and they'll be starting to crank money because they also set up a colony here at Tenochtitlan, and they've got some gold down here, and eventually in the Incas and everything, that they can start pushing out back into Europe. Overall, they think it's for the best. But then Turkey couldn't afford any new military. They got lucky and got some free military due to an event table, which they'll be able to reinforce themselves against the Persians. But otherwise, they're not going to be able to cope with this revolt, and they've really got nothing they can do. Now, let's go to the Portuguese. The Portuguese had the hardest of times. They had 3 loans. They had to pay interest on all of them. They paid off the foreign loan that was due this turn, but they had a national loan during this turn that they did a default on. That cost them a point of stability. But before they took that, they did an exceptional tax, so they didn't actually pay the stability loss. They're not allowed to take another national loan out, and they have a penalty on any foreign loans they take for the rest of this period. This is a situation you don't want to get into. And one of the reasons I don't like rolling loans if you don't have a really, really compelling reason for that money. Just getting yourself a couple extra pluses on some of the die rolls, on some of the tables, it always comes back and bites you. Here they've needed these loans. They needed to take that out to do the exceptional tax and everything, just in order to have a chance of finishing our moves off. Now that could go very badly, and they could end up losing Aden if they're not careful. We'll see. And, well, I'm only partway through the economic phase, so I'll continue. Okay, well, I just finished up the economic phase, and I think, again, not a lot of money for anybody. Venice, the definite exception. England as well. Venice had more money than they know what to do with. They're building up their army. That's kind of pointless because their army is really kind of expensive to build for them. They're trying to do it on the cheap, and it's improving their chances of survival by having that army. So they're going to be paying maintenance on it or whatever. But they don't want to push their DTI, their FTI, their manufacturers up above. There's no real advantage to it. That'll just produce them more money, and they're not going to stay as Venice for the game. This is their last period. So they'd like to be in a position to intervene somewhere, perhaps. They have a big enough navy to deal with anything in the Mediterranean. But their stability is not really high. They'd like to pump that up for a turn. See what happens. They may be going to war against Turkey very shortly. An aggressive war, possibly with the Mamluks included, to see what they can do to set them back even further. Is that something Venice particularly wants to do? Yes, but it's not really something they want for the Netherlands. Although eventually, in the long run, if they end up as the Habsburgs, it will be an advantage to have the Turks driven back as far as possible, I suppose. The question is, I've never seen Venice move over to the Habsburgs. They always look and say, the Habsburgs just aren't going to get the money, the victory points that we get, or the money for that matter. But the victory points really being because of the monopolies that Netherlands throws on the board. Even though by the time they switch to the Habsburgs, their point production is way down compared to their height. Assuming that they get into naval wars and trade wars with England and France and everyone else, still they crank more points than the Habsburgs do. Of course, it's possible with the Risto victory conditions that'll be different. All right, so what else did we see? We saw the English drive the Netherlands completely out of England. They now have a complete monopoly there. They were the other country with a lot of money, with enough money to do everything they kind of wanted. Other people really had to dig deep into their pockets to get anything at all, as we've already discussed. Also rolled up the reinforcements. And, you know, the Poles and the Persians just keep coming. Oman's kind of unhappy. The Turks would have really liked to have taken a defensive stance with them, but they're actually restricted and must take naval. So they can't build up their fortress or whatever. They've got their maximum size army. They've got another fleet in place. They're going to make a challenge against, this is actually in Oman, they're going to make a challenge against the Portuguese. Maybe they can stop them, maybe not. Portugal's going to have to give this war up at some point or another. But they really want that monopoly. Alright, well, I'm going to zip this one and send it up. And it's almost time for me to go to work, but that's about it.